I am really happy to be here. This is a co-sponsored event with the Office of Multicultural Affairs and the Key Center's Arts and Impact series. We'll talk a little bit more about what Arts and Impact is at the end here, but I want to pass it over to a fantastic student of ours who is going to lead us through facilitating this Lunch and Learn. His name is Demon Thomas. He was born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's double majoring in mass communications and sociology and minoring in Africana studies. He also has like 20 jobs. He's a really energetic and incredible part of our community. His future occupation is to become a successful TV entertainer who uses his platform to promote social justice. And while he is involved in all kinds of organizing here within the UNCA community, he's also working at the Key Center as the Arts and Impact Fellow. He works as the Africana Studies intern. He's a student ambassador, and he holds a senator position in SGA on the Equity and Inclusion Committee. So, Demon, I'm going to hand things over to you.
Thank you, Corey, for that wonderful introduction. Hey, you all, good afternoon. I'm glad to see you all here. So today I'll be introducing Charlotte-based visual artists Marcus Kiser and Jason Woodberry and Durham-based performance artist Quentin Talley. Recently, they presented and discussed Intergalactic Soul, their multimedia Afrofuturistic exhibit during a virtual residency. Kiser, Woodberry, and Talley broadly focused their work on presenting complementary conversations about American Black experiences, using the aesthetic and conceptual prisms of popular science fiction and comics to chronicle the various adventures of their fictional protagonists, Astro and Pluto. The artwork explores a cosmic sci-fi theme that is driven by social, political, and cultural undertones. This exhibit began in response to the 2014 police killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. So today, I have presented some questions. My first question I would like to ask is, how have you all used Afrofuturism to connect with other cultural communities in Charlotte? Were there any barriers, such as communicating with students whose first language was not English?
So first of all, hi everyone. Appreciate y'all taking the time out your day to listen to us run our mouths. I'm Jason Woodberry. I'm a multimedia artist, software engineer. Marcus, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, I'm Marcus Kiser. I am a multimedia designer, creative director as well. And then we have Quentin Talley.
What's up, everybody? Quentin Talley here. And I'm a creative. I work in all facets of the arts, from producing to actor to poet to musician. So very happy to be here.
So regarding your question, as far as, and I'm sure Marcus can probably go further in detail with this, but as far as the communication barrier, pictures in themselves existed before language did. There was hieroglyphics before we even had a language per se. So as far as the artwork communicating to various audiences, there hasn't been any type of language hasn't been an impediment in regards to people being able to digest the artwork and to understand the messages, the narratives behind that. As far as like, I guess let's say an internal dialogue, I personally believe there lies impediments within communicating within the Black community. And I say that in a sense from a generational standpoint. There is a lot of, in the art world period, there's a lot of gatekeeping. And that's just the reality of, I would say, probably pretty much any type of creative field. and meaning it just simply meaning the fact that, you know, when you introduce something to a group of people or to an audience, there's always going to be people who feel sort of challenged or may feel sort of I don't really know what's the word, but the fact that it's something totally different but it also is part of this class. I remember Marcus telling me one time he did an art piece of it was an art piece of this black dude. He had like a Gundam behind him, like, which for those who don't know, a Gundam is like a mech. It's a series. It's an anime series, one of the greatest anime series ever. But besides the fact, this guy has the keys to it, you know. And Marcus was saying how like he was told that wasn't black art, and you know, my idea is like, yo, if I just put a smiley face on a piece of paper, it's black art because I'm black and I made it. So, but I think when it comes to like Afrofuturism or anything along the lines that has sort of like a very new look to it, you know, or even like a new way of doing things, because from the visual standpoint, our artwork is all vector. You know, it's all done as far as the 2D and the 2D illustrations you see. It's all vector. It's all Adobe. This is not painted. This is not like drawn with graphite. So, you know, when you step into a fine arts world where your masters are like, you know, some big painting in this Gothic frame, you know, they're like, you know, one person asked us, so what is the master? Like, well, the master is an Illustrator file, you know, an Adobe file. And they were just like, what? Like, what, like, they don't know how to market that. They don't know how to sell that or how to talk about that. So the impediment sort of exists. That's kind of where you come across these, when you come across these barriers. It's never really the audience, you know, it's never really the community. Because one way or another, you know, they get it, they piece it together and they understand it. But I'd be more interested to hear Marcus is the graphic designer expertise amongst us all. So he could probably elaborate more.
Yeah, and you know, to piggyback on that, because we all pretty much come from these design, marketing backgrounds, and even Q with the musical background, I would say there haven't been any barriers so far outside of like gatekeepers of like these traditional fine artists mixed with, you know, these multimedia digital ways that, you know, we do stuff. Although the way we do stuff comes from a lot of the traditional art backgrounds. It's just the digital, like computers and digital art is just a medium. You know, it's just a different medium like paint or graphite or whatnot. But I was going to say, coming from these marketing backgrounds, that's always been my job, whether it's been in a comic book field, whether it's been in the sports field, whether it's been in Afrofuturism, is how do we communicate through imagery to get the message out to people, and we have to be able to do that in the most simplistic way. You know, like it can't be overly complicated. And I think we've, you know, I don't think there's been any barriers. And even with Q with the music, like music is a universal language as well. And just to attest to that, Jason and I, we had a residency at the McCall Center 2016. And you know, if anyone knows, the McCall is pretty much a community engagement arts residency. And our first project through the McCall was to engage with second language students, or whose English was the second language students, and like talk to them about how to create iconography and logos for like these like mock businesses that they created. So I think coming from that design background, because, you know, with this idea of inclusive design, like how do we use design and art to communicate? How do we use it to speak? How do we use it to engage? I think so far there hadn't been any barriers outside of just like those traditional gatekeeper artists. Q, did you want to chime in on the music side of it?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you know, music is a universal language, anyway. So there, as far as I know, there haven't been any barriers. Actually, we had a person from France visit the show. She was just in town visiting, and stopped by the theater. somebody recommended the show to her, and she stopped by. And English is not her first language. French is. She knew a little bit of English, of course, but she understood the whole concept and the whole 9 yards. So, yeah, the language barrier hasn't been a factor as of yet.
And one last thing, like learning to this is a good challenge for like young artists and designers and creatives and all learning how to speak through color, patterns, and melodies without actual, like when we're doing art, like how do you speak to people without drawing a figure? Or even like how do you speak through music without even like singing a word or whatnot? Like that's a good challenge on like how we can like use those type of things to like communicate with people as well.
And lastly, I know with this, for if there's any creative students, if there's videography, design or dance or whatever it may be, even if you're not into comic books, there's a comic book I recommend. There's a G.I. Joe comic book that came out a long time ago, but it's just, I think it recently re-released for the 20th anniversary or something, but it's called Silent Intruder. And the entire comic book, probably about 25 pages, and there's no words whatsoever. So all you're doing is looking for one panel to the next, but at nowhere point in this comic book do you feel like you're lost and you don't know what's going on. So you get the entire, I guess to say, dialogue in this way from the expressions drawn on the characters for what's happening. And that's like sequential storytelling, like master right there. So, and even in that's a very good example of being able to tell a story, to tell a narrative without even speaking a word. It's like $4 on eBay. It's like really cheap.
Thank you. For our next question, from an activist standpoint, why did you all feel like it was important to use Intergalactic Soul to engage with the Charlotte community?
Marcus, you go ahead, man.
Well, this started off the heels of the Mike Brown killing, and I don't know, like me as me as a Black artist, me as an African American male, I always felt like it was my obligation to use, I use my work to serve, and it just so happened like my occupation is designer / artist / illustrator, whatever, multimedia designer, whatever box I need to fit in that day. But I always just thought it was like my obligation to use my work as my platform, and to always trying to figure out how can that work serve to better communities and to connect people. So we've always been into science fiction. Like I'm a huge science fiction comic book nerd. And I was saying Monday night, we were on here Monday night, or whenever our last talk was, there was like this Facebook argument, and this guy was saying how Mike Brown was in the wrong. And, immediately, I was like, yo, like we can start an art exhibit. And you kind of, you use the science fiction tones to like kind of soften the blow. But like in these pieces and music, like we're talking about some real issues. And the point was like not to come off preachy, but to kind of like dive into the art. And even though it's science fiction, there are like some really real undertones to a lot of the pieces and the work. So I just always felt like, it was an obligation to use my work to serve communities and engage through art, because I'm a quiet guy, like in real life. So I'm always quiet. I'm always introverted at the back of the room. But, I found out that my art can make an impact. And, the same as like, even if I'm doing art or if I'm a musician or, even like Jason said, he's a programmer. Like I feel like whatever we do, like whatever worlds we're in, we could use that stuff to connect and communicate our messages without being super preachy and over the top, but also being like serious about what we're talking about.
To jump on that too, like, and I'm sure Q can attest as well, is like when there's not, despite the optics, there's not a lot of Black people in these fields, like from a professional standpoint. Like, there's never been a job I've been to where I wasn't the only engineer. I wasn't the only Black programmer engineer. Like, there might be a woman there, you know, and she's the only woman, you know. That's kind of like the irony of, even in like my profession, you know, I don't know if we have any future engineers or programmers, but generally for women and minorities, only 10% of them continue their career after 8 years. And it's, you know, and there's a reason behind that. So I think, along with the obligation to use my talents, there's also a obligation to show, you know, young Black kids that want to be, you know, a programmer, if they want to be a performer, in Q's case, if they want to be a musician or a graphic designer, like, yo, you can do this. Like, you can make a living and profession out of this. Because I was raised, you know, and granted, like, God bless my parents, you know, but I was raised like, hey, you know, you go to school, you get like a government job, you know what I mean? You get your insurance, whatever your benefits, and you just ride that puppy out to the end. You know, and I was like the one person in the family. I was just like, nah, I can't do that. Like, you know, so you know, you find yourself in these positions where you're at times you're the only person in the room, and you have to swallow that and continue to pursue, because you never know who's looking at you to see if they can possibly do it, who's finding that level of optimism that they need, or that motivation that they need, simply by you being present. Like, not even being extraordinary or, you know, making a bunch of artwork and stuff, like you simply being present and being like good at your profession, you know, at your craft. There's motivation within that in itself. And I pass it off to Q, because Q, you're like the only Black owner of a theater company, right, on the East Coast, with exception of Tyler Perry.
Yeah. Well, it's a couple of us, but you know, it's few and far between. You know, that network is important, of finding, you know, finding like-minded artists. Yeah, you know, we within theater, you know, just in North Carolina, they are few and far between. You know, you got, why am I forgetting the name? In Winston-Salem, they do National Black Theater Festival every year. So you have them, you have Black Poetry Theater in Durham. You have another theater company here, production company, Rory Sheriff's production company. So you have folks that are in theater, but like you said, it's few and far between, the folks, the artists that you can connect with. So the more you can network and connect with those artists, the better it would be. But back to the activism question. You know, I feel like as a Black artist, you know, just our history, our lineage as Black people in America, you have no choice but to have some piece of activism within your artwork, whether it be subvert or overt, you know. But I feel like all Black artists have some type of activism within their work. That's just me, though.
All right, for our next question, during your Artistic Talk Monday, Marcus, you mentioned how the idea of Interelastic Soul stemmed from the Michael Brown incident. In the future, do you all plan on like representing or adding any Black female characters to the exhibit?
So right now, there's actually, in the Intergalactic Soul, in the Intergalactic Soul narrative, the universe is actually a Black woman. There's a piece on the virtual exhibition. It's like the third or fourth one down, but it's called Mother Universe. And I'll let Marcus explain, because that's sort of like a sub narrative within Intergalactic Soul, that he created, but there is a female presence, a prominent female presence within In the Galactic Soul. And truthfully, like, man, I don't know, we have at least like 40 more pieces or so. We got a lot of work that has just never been shown. Like, we just do, like, and it's it's always about like space, and it's certain things in which that we create where it's like, we could throw this on like a virtual exhibition, but there's something different about actually having work on the wall and people in the room and you being able to converse with them face to face, which I'm sure we'll all appreciate once this COVID thing is over. But I'll let Marcus elaborate more on that.
Yeah, so the protagonists of Intergalactic Soul are two young Black kids, but I also have there's a subset story called The Last Black Starfighter, and this is the comic book or the entertainment or the TV show that these kids watch, and it kind of gets them through these like missions. It's like they're Netflix, or whatnot. But one thing in like talking about like inclusiveness and inclusive design, I always think it's important for representation, and like in anything we do, I always kind of like want to represent like a lot. We talk about inclusiveness, but I feel like in a lot of times of inclusiveness, we tend to forget a lot of people and we leave a lot of people out, as far as like races and ethnicities and genders, and there's so much stuff that's left out, and it always just comes out to like, recently, but growing up, it was always like this main white male hero. So I say that to say, like, within this Last Black Starfighter, that protagonist is like it's a female, and she's just like this badass, like godlike figure, starfighter pilot, whatever she wants to be. And she's, I just call her Mother Universe. I didn't really come up with a name for her, but even like that, the idea of the universe, and the infinite goes back to kind of like the religious meanings, like of like God, almost like the God of the universe, which like they our whole life, like they've never portrayed God as like a woman. It's always just been a white man with a beard. And recently you might see something where it's like Morgan Freeman or something, but yeah, like just in anything that we do. And like a side note, like I see brother Chris Rudersul is on here. Chris, he's with the Charlotte Journalism Collaborative. And like, even we talk about inclusiveness, like that's like 6 different media outlets that represent everything from LGBTQ to Latinx to the Black communities to like whatever you could think of. And like they, working on those projects, like we came together to build this comic book about COVID and like how that affects different communities. So like, I think to go back, representation is really important. And like, although like these two protagonists in Intergalactic Soul are like, these 2 young Black kids, we have like different people scattered throughout the galaxy, that kind of represent like everyone, like not just like females, but whatever characters, we had like everything from robots and Jim Crow aliens, like all types of crazy stuff. But yeah, and also like I hadn't written out the whole story for The Last Black Starfighter. We really hadn't had to, because this just exists in a contemporary art gallery. But like Jason said, there's probably about 60 pieces that we have, that we might only showcase like 30 or 40, depending on the size of the gallery or the space, or like the size of like the website, like our online presence as well. So yeah, there are like female characters, just to keep it short.
What advice would you give to upcoming creators and artists who may struggle with advocating for social change but are afraid to be viewed as radical?
So I just, to put it quite frank, is that you have to, and I say this metaphorically and somewhat literally, is that when you take on any type of tradition, and I say tradition because a lot of these things aren't necessarily political, you know. I always get like, the one thing always gets under my skin is like, you know, when I have conversations about like, you know, police brutality, and like they try to turn it into this political subject. I'm like, there'll never be a voting ballot whether police should kill unarmed black men. That's just not going to happen. Like, this is not a political thing. This is ingrained in the traditions of the country that we live in. But I say, like, you have to be ready to die on the cross. Like, you have to go into it knowing the risks, and it's just a matter of what is more important to you. I say that to say that, like, between me, Marcus, and Q, like, and this is not to be braggadocious, but there's an extensive resume of like we did a project with Jordan Brand. You know, we did, you know, Marcus had a project with Adidas during the NBA All-Star, you know, here in Charlotte. And it's like, there's these commercial outlets, but like the commercial opportunities don't really come to you as much when you're talking about like some real stuff, because it's not safe. It's not always approachable. But at the end of the day, like, I do what feeds my soul and what I feel like is going to really create significant change. You know, and most of our leaders, for the most part, I mean, you know, unfortunately, they died broke. You know, like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, they didn't have a lot of money. You know what I mean? Rosa Parks. So these people didn't die rich. But what they did do was create a legacy and create a ripple effect of change. And I think that is something that taking on any field, and this is not just limited to like racial issues. You know what I mean? We're talking about like, you know, challenging, you know, the status quo within the workplace. I'm not a woman by no means. I have absolutely no clue on what it's like to be a woman. You know what I mean? But I know that these issues do exist. You know, I've been in meetings where like in the marketing meetings where, you know, these guys were developing an app, and the app was targeted towards like women within their late 20s, early 30s, kind of entry-level motherhood, soccer moms, and the only woman in the room, nobody asked her opinion. You know, like I've seen that happen. And, you know, and I say that is in the moment of her, if she decides to speak up, then like she's emotional, or, you know, she's having one of those days, or that time of the month, or something like this. There's you have to know what you're up against, and know that like whatever you say, whatever you do, the minute that you do stand up. James Baldwin had a quote, who was like the most brilliant person that ever lived, in my opinion. But he said, and I'm paraphrasing because I'm nowhere near as much as I'm not a genius like he is, but he said, when you stand up and face and look the world in the face like you have a right to be here, you have challenged everything of the Western culture. And I'm completely paraphrasing that. But the point being is that like the minute that you make this declaration, I don't care how good you are, how talented you are. Kaepernick, pure example, the guy took a team to the playoffs like 3-4 consecutive years, was pretty much like 3 plays for winning the Super Bowl. He doesn't even have a job now. You know what I'm saying? And all he did was kneel. You know, so you have to be aware of what you're going up against. You have to have your you got to have your heart right. You have to know what you're talking about, and you also have to have a very good grasp on your emotions. Doing Intergalactic Soul and having talks and talking to people from all different walks of life about racism is not always the easiest thing. Just to be honest, you know, it's not. And there's moments where, you know, you feel this level of frustration, but you also have to poise yourself, because in this moment in time, you know, having a conversation with this person, one, I want them to feel like they could be honest and open and really express what it is that they're feeling or what it is that they're confused about, or whatever it is that they're questioning, you know. And there's also that's part on me that whether I accept it or not, in some way, shape, or form, in this moment, I am an ambassador on behalf of people who are looking for, you know, they're looking for a social change, you know. And so I can't come off preachy. I can't come off mad and like pissed off. Like I have to talk about this in a manner that I don't want to say it's detached of emotion so much, but the priority is like this person understand what it is that needs to be said, or what it is that I'm coming from. You know what I mean? And I'm sure if anybody's been in like a debate class or anything, which I've never had, but I'm sure it's kind of like it's probably fall along the lines of the same thing. Gentlemen, y'all can chime in whenever.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, it's heavy work, and I think first thing is the way I approach a lot of this stuff is I think we all have to check our privileges, and we all have to understand what our privileges are. And everybody has some type of privilege. But then it's just about like identifying the problem and how do you approach, like, what's your idea? How do we heal, connect, and build like better spaces for that problem? Because like I know like now like there's a lot of stuff that's like not okay. And there are some people that don't want to acknowledge that, but then there are a lot of people that do acknowledge that. Like there's a lot of stuff that's like not okay in the world. And I say just like in this work, there's you have to have the capacity to do it. And it's okay, like if you don't have the capacity now, like Jason mentioned, like not to remove all emotion, but emotion is fine. But being able to have the capacity for the work. And if you don't have the capacity, you have to like step aside and let people that do have the capacity in, because like now, like, like I'm 42 and I just can't remember when stuff was okay. Like I can't, like, even like last year with all of the police killings and like the protests, like I'm like, oh, okay, like again, because I remember this stuff back in '92. Like I remember like the Rodney King stuff and like the Watts protests, and like it's like every decade there's like some new stuff. And then I remember like stuff my dad told me, stuff that my granddad told me, like all the way like coming home from like World War II on like how they were treated. And it's like, and then you kind of think and you're like, damn, like stuff has never been okay. But like I say, you have to have the capacity because you have to keep fighting, and you can't be like, being afraid has never gotten anyone anywhere. And being afraid to approach these issues on no matter what level you're doing it at, like we're doing it from a creative level, like whatever our field is, like we gotta keep, and that's part of Afrofuturism too, is like looking toward the future and kind of having this space of things that will get better. And we have to keep pushing, and we have to have a faith that like things will be okay. So I say like the easiest thing to do for like young creatives out there is like, identify the problem, find out, like identify your own privileges, and then find a way to like connect, build, and like heal, however it may be. So that's my advice. Q, did you have any advice for that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the best thing you can do is use your voice in your own way, because everybody has their own unique voice, and just don't be afraid to speak up. Like I said, I feel like as Black artists, we all have a little piece of activism in us, a piece of social justice. As Marcus said, these issues aren't new. They've been passed down from generation to generation, and each generation has been trying to solve these issues in their own way. And as artists, we do it with art. So don't be afraid to speak up. Um, as a writer and a poet, um, I've done corporate gigs to revolutionary gigs, so you got to be able to do both, pick and choose, pick and choose your lanes, and when to be a revolutionary, and and when to I guess kind of tone it down sometimes. There's a balance, because everything isn't rah rah all the time. Sometimes you can be chill about things. Everything is not a issue at all times. There are different facets of life. So just don't be a one-sided activist, I guess you would say.
And the piggyback you said too, there's and I would recommend, and if anybody gets the opportunity, there's a show. It was very short-lived. I believe it was only 2 episodes, but you can find it online, and it's called Icons, where Maya Angelou and Dave Chappelle, like, it's about like an hour long, and they're just like conversing. And it's something in there that is one part where Dave is asking her, like, he's talking about like Martin and Malcolm and, these like Black figures who were like attacked and killed. And he asked her about like, doesn't that just make you mad? And she was like, it's okay to be mad. Just don't be bitter, because bitterness eats at the host. Like I recommend anybody gets a chance to watch it. But I say that is like when you're young, and we've all been young at some time. It might have been a minute ago, but we've all been young. But there's also kind of like this thing where, because you're young and you're finding your voice at the same time, it never hurts to reach out to an elder. There's a lot of things. I've learned how to talk about a lot of things and how to articulate myself better from having conversations with like mentors, with like, just older men and women who have been through this, who've had, who've taken this role before, and who makes work that addresses these things, or, had to speak at a panel, or, or people who just simply know how to communicate within like their own communities and whatnot. It's really important that you learn how to articulate that and learn how to talk about things, because you never want to, it's really easy for you to all of a sudden look like the villain, or, to look like, you're just this mad person on a rant, and your message just goes totally unheard because your tone or the way that you're saying it or the language that you're using is just completely off-putting. I've always said, just because you're Black doesn't mean like you are qualified to speak on the Black experience. Like, it just, you can go through it and we can vent, like, we can be in like this circle and like, oh man, this and this and that, say the N-word, whatever we want to say. But like when it comes to like speaking in the public and actually talking to people about it, like just because you've been through the experiences does not qualify you to say that. Everybody can't speak like James Baldwin. Everybody can't speak like Martin. Some people just can't simply speak like in a very, like, I want to say like flat tone, but a very normal tone when it comes to this, because they get so emotionally riled up. So I'll leave you on this note. As a young creative, one thing that's very, very important is also that you have some form of outlet. So if you are going to talk about these things, do not step out on stage or step out in front of an audience with like your emotions up here. Like, don't do it. Like, have these conversations behind doors. I call and I'll talk to Marcus, like, as he said, everything isn't okay. When this Capitol riot thing happened, I created like these pieces, and like the tone and the title of these pieces are like one is called Leave Your Conscience at the Door. One is called, we done hit the monsters in the floor. I got a piece called I Can Baptize a Brick, like where I'm talking about like the redemption of drug dealers. I have a friend whose his whole entire college was paid off through drug money. You know what I mean? And the redemption aspect of that, of his brother who passed away while doing that. But the only reason his brother did that is so that his brother could go to college. So this whole like conversation, but the tone is very, very, you know, like, cause I have these frustrations. Like I'm looking at this Capitol riot, like, yo, you gotta be kidding me. Like, yo, I swear I can't even walk in, I can't even jog through like some of these neighborhoods in Charlotte. You know what I mean? So, you know, I had a conversation with Marcus because I'm like, look, man, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm making, you know, and I'm just explaining the pieces to him and just making sure like, yo, like, I got to get this out. I got to say it. I got to put it out there. I got to say it to somebody before I present it to the rest of the world, because I know I can have this conversation with Marcus, and Marcus is going to be the person like, yeah, you know, you might be wilding. You know what I'm saying? So you just got to have that, you got to have like some form of outlet, man, like something to kind of take that emotions down to where you're just kind of like you kind of get that sense of your aim back. You know what I mean? You can't shoot a sniper rifle and you just like, you have to have like that poise and that calm in order to hit that mark. That's the best I could explain it, but you get what I'm saying though. Yeah.
And for our last question, as young Black men, what are some strategies we can use to maintain brotherhood without the influence of toxic masculinity?
Addressing toxic masculinity at the door. I think in my personal belief, I think the resolution for toxic masculinity is the same resolution that the same expectations that I would have of white people who want to solve racism. It's like, yo, if your friend says some like wild racist stuff, like check them. Like, yo, like none of my homeboys are beyond being checked. You know what I'm saying? Like, I love you. And the fact that I do love you, I'll check you. So, you know, that type of behavior, if you give it a pass, like once, then like, you know, you're okay in it and you're giving it a level of normalcy when you should speak on it right then and there. Like, you know, and like, and even like, in even checking ourselves, our verbiage, to tell myself in 2015, this was right before we went into the McCall, there was an artist named Hollis who was in residency, and Hollis is like a phenomenal artist, like absolutely just, I mean, it's crazy the stuff that she creates. And I fell in love with her work. And at one point, like we're all in the elevator, and I made the comment that she was like one of my favorite female artists. And I had to check myself later because I was like, why did I preface it like that? Like I've never said like LeBron James is my favorite male basketball player. I've never said that. You know what I'm saying? Whenever I'm talking about anything in like a male perspective, there's never like this disclaimer or prefix in the front of it, like, oh, that's my favorite like male artist. I'd be like, no, Takashi Murakami's dope. You know, Kerry James Marshall's dope. I'm never like the male Kerry James Marshall. Like, so I had to check myself. I had like a real moment of honesty. First, the question is like, where did that come from? Two, like, how do I go about being more conscious when I say these things? And then third, I've reached out to her and I was like, yo, that was kind of messed up. Like I shouldn't did that. And I was like, and that's not like something that I do when I'm talking about male artists. And I apologized to her, and that's it. You know what I mean? So, I mean, like, yo, if you have to check yourself, be completely honest with yourself. Especially like, and I say Black men because like, you know, early 90s hip hop, late 90s, late 80s, early 90s hip hop was very, very toxic. Like they would say faggot, they would throw all these words out left and right. And it's like, it was just a part of like the culture to be like, show no emotion and just like, you know, like that was, and that's what like we grew up listening. Granted, it's entertainment, but like, yo, this thing is part of our culture. Like I always say, hip hop is our culture. It's entertainment to the rest of the world, but it is like ingrained in our culture. So there is kind of like this detox that needs to happen, and I think it really starts with us, like again, checking ourselves, but as well as like, you know, checking our friends and holding our friends accountable whenever they say something.
Yeah, I was gonna say because toxic masculinity is definitely a huge problem. It's a huge problem. How do we address that, and how do we like strategies around? I got in an argument. I got to get off Facebook because I see some statuses and I'll be like, it'll be some stuff. It'll keep me up at night. Like I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna respond. But like, and then like if I don't respond, I'll be up all night thinking about how I need to respond to this person. But like, I don't know, like I think I don't think a lot of people understand like where the historical stuff on where there's these like ideals and these gender biases and all of this stuff comes from. Um, and it's weird because it's so poisonous. Like it's so poisonous. And like I guess also like having like a diverse group of friends. Like I got like my mentor is, you know, he identifies as gay, and like, you know, I never had an issue with like his, you know, I never had an issue with that. Like he's always been like this amazing person to me. Or like I just got like a huge, you know, from different religions, different backgrounds, and I think that's helpful too. But like then you start to kind of find out. I think the biggest thing, like a great strategy to like help a lot of this stuff is like finding out what connects us, because we're so quick to look at like our differences, and like we're defined by our differences, but we never figure out like what are the things that connect us, and we all are connected in some kind of way. And you know, like I have to do this stuff all day for work because I work for, you know, I work for a company that designs prosthetics and spinal braces, and they're all like custom. And you know, I have to learn like everybody's different. Everybody has different bodies because everything is like 3D printed and is like digitally scanned. But like you see so many people with differences and you know, like quote unquote deformities. But then you kind of get to know like people, and you realize like we're all pretty much the same. I remember we were and this was like a while back, we were sitting in front of like Common Market out in Plaza Midwood. Plaza Midwood is like the most diverse, weirdest place. You see somebody with purple hair walking, it'll be whatever. But like, I'll never forget, like, it was a conversation about religion and spirituality. And there was one guy, Jimmy, he was like, yo, like, I don't, you know, like if God exists, he was on this whole thing about how there wasn't a God and like there was nothing else out there, because if there was a God, then why would he make certain people like this and make certain people like that? And like, why is this person this way and that person's that way? And I tried to explain to Jimmy, I was like, yo, but those differences are man-made. Like we as people created those differences. That's got nothing to do with the higher power or higher faith. And Napoleon, who's our friend Napoleon, was a comedian now. He was explaining to like the way we look at animals. Like when we see a lion, we just see a lion. We don't notice the differences in the lions. Like we don't notice like if that lion has a bigger foot than the other lion. To us, it's just a lion. And he was explaining to Jimmy, like, why can't he just see people like that? Like pretending like if there were aliens that came down that day, like he would just see us as people. Like the aliens would be like, oh, those are just humans. Like the alien wouldn't be like, oh, that human has scoliosis, or that human has blah, blah, blah. Like it's like how we view things. And I think like understanding like how people connect to each other, understanding like a lot of these historical references on like where this like toxic masculinity derives from, with like also could be like a huge strategy in like solving and stuff. Like I'm in marketing meetings all day too with like Jason said earlier. And, you know, there was one time like, you know, my boss was a woman, and I was looking at the CEOs like berate her about like her ideas. And she was like obviously the most brilliant person in the room. But I was just like, why aren't they listening to you? Like, why aren't these like old silly CEOs like wanting to listen or understand? And it was obviously clear that she was like right in her stance. But I, you know, and I told her, I was like, I feel a certain way, like there's a bunch of sexism towards you just because you are a woman. Like, I don't think those, and these were all guys, like my team is all like European. So they're all in Europe. And then I was like wondering like, yo, so is this how they act? And like one guy was from Iceland. And I was like, is this what are the ideals of like women running companies in Iceland? You know, I don't know, but I just think like just finding out like what connects us. And we never look at like what connects us. We're so busy focusing on like what makes us different. And I think that's where we lose out on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that, I mean, y'all pretty much said it all, but you know, you just have to call things out when you see them, and that's that, you know, and you know, try and treat everybody by the golden rule, you know what I'm saying? Do unto others as you have them do unto you. So, you know, toxic masculinity. That's a whole. Ooh, we could be here forever. But you know, you really have to just call things out as you see them, especially with your brothers, who you know you can talk to about those things and just call them out.
I think too, one thing, like as far as taking a step towards detoxing ourselves of like the mindset, because like, you know, I'm at some point in time, like I was guilty of it too, you know, when I was like younger, you know what I mean? And the idea, I didn't know any better. I just thought like, yo, this is the way that men behave. You know, this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, you know, there's these things that I'm not supposed, these like emotions I'm not supposed to show. And granted, like, and the wild part is like, my parents have never told me like, don't cry. Like, you're not allowed to cry. Anything along the lines of that. For some reason though, I just felt like this obligation that like, yo, I'm not supposed to like show anybody, like no one's supposed to see me cry. You know what I'm saying? Like no one's supposed to see me hurt. And at the end of the day, it doesn't do anything but send you to an early grave, because like you're keeping all these emotions and things along the lines of that built up. And it's just like, you know, it eats away at you. But I think one of the things towards like detoxing it is like, first of all, like men taking on more of a role as nurturers, you know, because it's always this like learning, like, again, like becoming a nurturer, like learning to care for things, care for other people, learning to simply like open yourself up and be completely honest, like giving yourself the right to cry, giving yourself the right to feel a certain way, to be attracted to whatever you want to be attracted to, whoever you want to be attracted to, you know, just like totally like taking a look, and Marcus said, like taking a look at history and seeing where all these like behaviors and these trends, and I can't say trends, these behaviors and these like standards, where are they derived from? And then, you know, question it, why do I make this a part of my character? Like, why am I adopting these type of behaviors and this mindset? You know, I was in a meeting one time, it's like diversity meeting. And I asked people, I was like, you know, if you were stranded on an island, like, and you had your ideologies, the things that you thought, like, what of those would help you to your survival? Like, does you being a toxic masculine, does that really contribute to your survival? Like, you being a sexist, racist, does that contribute to your survival as a person, even within society? Like, in any way, shape, or form, like, does that really contribute to you becoming a better person, or you elevating your family, or helping you, you know, like, and when you question those things, you just realize like how much like dumb stuff we just took on, like dumb things that we say, and like just kind of knee-jerk reactions we have to stuff where it's just like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, like, you know, it was at one point like, yo, if you get a guy a hug, like you're gay. And it's like, well, like, why is that an issue? Like, why can't I embrace my friend? Why can't I embrace my brother? Like, you know what I'm saying? Why can't I show like affection towards my friend? It has to be this barrier where it's like, no, we can't, you know, there has to be 6 inches, you know what I mean? Like all those type of things are just absolutely stupid. As Marcus said, like, it's things that we've created, and we've just kind of like poisoned ourselves as the same, because we want to have kind of like this look, and it's all hypocritical, you know, even down to like the hip hop, when dudes were talking about like, you know, early 90s dudes was just like super masculine, anti-gay, but I'm like, you're wearing Gucci, like all this stuff is designed by gay designers, you know what I mean? Like you're adapting to these cultures, just like the same thing which like we will hold like white people accountable to, of like, oh, you love our culture, but you hate us as people. Like, you don't, and it's, like I said, as Q said, we could go all day about it, because it's such like a large, a huge issue. And there's so many things within it that need to be addressed. But I guess to say, if anything, man, to the point of just simply checking yourself, like at the door, and then checking your friends, like speaking up, like, and letting your friends know, like, yo, this is like, this is not cool, this is not okay. And also just offering the support of like, yo, man, like, we both got to change the way we think. Like, yo, and let's support each other. Like, check me. If I say something, or I think some sort of way, or I go about something in some manner that presents that, like, yo, check it. And just being open to that criticism, man. That, I think that's really the only remedy.
All right. Thank you, Demon. And thank you, Q and Jason and Marcus. Yeah, I could have listened to that for a lot longer. I did want to mention this was part of the Arts and Impact series. It's the Key Center and Office of Multicultural Affairs. The idea behind this series is to celebrate the arts as tools and pathways to inspire civic dialogue and action, to amplify social justice initiatives, to celebrate cultural heritage and connections, and to support equity and inclusion initiatives. We also like to talk about cultivating a connection within communities and between the university and the community, and talking about sustainability and economic health and how it's related to art. I also wanted to mention, Megan and I were talking before this, I wanted to read, just to close us out, the Intergalactic Souls artist statement, because it's so closely tied to what we're doing with our series, and it's so beautifully written. Equity, accessibility, and futurism comprise the crucible for creating multimedia works that not only dignify the bodies and experiences of people of color, but envision them in an empowered future. Afrofuturism is embedded through design to connect and educate community members across experiences and identities. Likewise, after conceptualization, we rely on the insight and participation of community members to co-create art that creates sustainable economic opportunity and social vitality.
One last statement is Black History Month. I can't get on here without shouting out my aunt and uncle who helped integrate UNCA. Aunt D, Charles. So yeah, like, and they gave me this whole speech on, she was kind of playing it down, but she was like, hey, like, I had the opportunity to go, this was the 60s. She's like, I had the opportunity to go to Michigan State or UNCA, and my granddad made her go to UNCA for the, and she helped integrate the school. So shout out, like, super Black History Month for that, and West Charlotte forever, Lions for life, Demons. So thank you guys.